Thank you all for joining us today for our webinar, Decoding Sales, Boosting Sales Performance in a Digital World. The webinar is being presented by Janek Performance Group and SalesMastery, and we're looking forward to diving into this year's sales performance scorecard findings with all of you. Before I turn it over to our two speakers, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we will be sure to share the link with all of you after the event is complete. We welcome you to revisit the content yourself and also share it with others. We also invite your questions. Please find the chat box on your screen. If you think of a question for the speakers at any point in time, please submit it, and we will either hold it for the discussion portion at the end of the event, or we will reach out directly after the webinar. At this time, I'm going to hand the floor over to Justin Zappulla, Managing Partner here at Janek Performance Group. Justin, it's all yours.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. And thank you, everybody, for joining today. I'm really excited to have a chat and share what we know about decoding sales in a digital world. So without further ado, I will get us started. By introduction, my name is Justin Zappulla. I am co-founder and managing partner at Janek Performance Group. And just a quick commercial on Janek for those in the audience who may not be familiar. Janek is a leading training and consulting firm in the area of sales. We help sales organizations improve performance through the development of their people or strategic guidance on sales operations. We serve clients worldwide and are very proud that we're award-winning in virtually all industry awards or most industry awards across the board. Now, I'll be your host, and I'm incredibly excited to discuss what top sales organizations are doing to win, and with no other than, let's call him the godfather of sales performance studies, Barry Traylor. Barry, thank you so much for joining today. I'd be shocked if everybody doesn't know who you are, but just in case, if you would, give us a quick introduction on who you are and what you're doing at Sales Mastery.
Sure. Happy to be here. Hey, everybody. Thanks for taking time out to join us today. I'm sure there are a number of people in the audience who have never heard of me, but hopefully you've heard of Sales Mastery, possibly the forerunner of that, CSO Insights, which Jim Dickey and I started back in the early 2000s, surveying B2B companies and strictly B2B, but looking at sales demographics, sales performance, sales training, sales technology. Having done that, we just released our 20th annual report. We have surveyed thousands of companies over the years, and happy to present our findings for our 2024 sales performance scorecard. So we should jump into it.
Awesome. Thanks, Barry. Yeah, well, let's go ahead and get started. So I think for a bit of context, we're certainly very excited about sponsoring this year's 2024 study at Janek. Research is incredibly important to us. We also do continuous research, and it's our way of understanding how sales is evolving. Sales is one of those professions that is constantly evolving, and it moves quickly, and you got to pay attention to those moves, right, to stay ahead of it. So we do it internally. I really appreciate the work that you guys do over at Sales Mastery. We're happy to sponsor the survey. But I think to get started, I think if you could just give us a little background, Barry, just on the overall survey, who are the respondents, how long you've been doing it, how you analyze and maybe report on the data. That would be helpful.
Sure. Well, as mentioned, we just released our 20th annual. So Jim and I teamed up in 2002, worked on a book called The Sales and Marketing Excellence Challenge, Changing How the Game is Played. And he had been doing surveys for several years at that point. And we used to call people and actually survey them. And this was also when the tech bubble was expanding in the early 2000s. And, if we got 100 or 150 responses, we were kind of over the moon. 2004 was the first year we did it online, and that really boosted, the participation. Again, strictly B2B, but companies of all sizes, because we're able to segment the data after. And we do offer benchmarking. For people who take the survey, we can compare their responses with companies of their size and so on. But again, we look at sales demographics, the size of the sales organization, their performance in terms of revenue attainment, reps meeting, beating quota, and so on. We look at sales management, sales training, and sales technology. And as you mentioned, all of those have changed remarkably over the last 20 plus years. And we've been tracking that all that time. Just to give you some of the logistics, the 2024 SPS Sales Performance Scorecard that I'm going to be reporting on today, and that you'll all get a copy of the report, we launched that at the beginning of Q2 this year. So the 2024 study is looking back at 2023 and Q1 of 2024. Okay. And when I talk about the 2023 report, that looked back at 2022 and Q1 of 2023. And it's interesting, just by way of opening up the conversation, to look at the difference between those 2 years. Coming out of the pandemic, there was a lot of pent-up demand. 2021 was a pretty good year. Everybody thought 2022 was going to, really be a barn burner. It wasn't as strong as 2021. The numbers that we reported last year for 2022 were 87% average revenue plan attainment, 53% of reps meeting or beating quota. So that was 2023 looking back at 2022. This year, I think everybody was thinking, or coming out of 2022, I think everybody was hoping 2023 was going to, pick up the pace again. And in fact, the numbers, revenue attainment dropped from 87 to 83%, and percentage of reps meeting, beating, going dropped from 53 to 49%, which was lowest we've seen in a number of years. Having said that, I think everybody coming into this year was really hoping, okay, 2024, this is the year. And in fact, we asked, again, because we wait till the end of Q1, we asked how it was tracking. And 2/3 of respondents said they expected, based on Q1 2024, to be about the same or less than 2023. So there are clearly some headwinds here that people are facing. And I think now everybody's trying to both figure out how to close out 2024 as strongly as they can, and hoping that 2025 is actually going to be the year. Some people have even offered the slogan, survive until 25. I think part of what we want to talk about today is, how can you do better consistently, including the environment you're operating in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's consistent with what we've seen here at Janek. I mean, there was definitely some headwinds, right, and some challenges that sales organizations were facing. But I think you're right. For those of us in sales, we're optimists. So we want to believe that it's the next quarter, the next year. We're all looking for that. So hopefully you're right. Hopefully 2025 is the year. But even within that, you've got winners and losers, right, on both sides. So you have companies that are doing better than others. And despite these headwinds and despite where those things landed, I think what I want to talk about with you today is, what is it that top performing organizations are doing differently, right, than the middle of the pack or those laggards? So to help us with that, I know one of the key aspects in your survey is the scorecard. Right. So you've developed a great scorecard. I love the scorecard. It's an easy way, I think, of visualizing what needs to happen. So I'd love if you could just give us a little bit of background, right, on that scorecard, some of the definitions, how it's used, and I'll share a little bit what it looks like here.
Great. Yeah, this is actually an update of a model that Jim and I did back in 2006 and introduced in 2007. Originally, it was called the Sales Relationship Process Matrix, the SRP, and it had 5 levels of relationship on the vertical axis and 4 levels of sales process. I had actually defined the 5 levels back in 1992 or so. And and an article that Jim wrote for Forbes magazine in 2000 defined 4 levels of process implementation. And the joke for us was it only took us 7 more years to figure out we could put them in a matrix, which we did and have been gathering data on ever since. In 2022, we redefined the matrix as a scorecard, and we relabeled 3 of the 5 levels of relationship. I'll talk about that in just a second. As you can see, there are now 5 levels of process implementation, and we added that 5th level customized to reflect machine learning and AI as it is introduced and impacting sales. So very quickly, looking at the 5 levels of relationship, transactional vendors are seen as folks who have reliable quality services, but there's really nothing unique about them. They're undifferentiated in the marketplace, but are seen as, viable and approved players. And we define transactional as rapid, repetitive, and routine. And so a lot of repeat business, a lot of rapidly recurring and renewing business. Yeah. Preferred suppliers, you have a track record of delivery. Generally, you're now understanding how people use your products and services and are building a network of contacts. As a solution consultant, you now start moving away from your products and services and really focusing on the customer and their business. What you do impacts their business, their bottom line, and really starting to understand the customer's customer. Strategic collaborator is a new label. We used to call it, I didn't mention this, we used to call it approved vendor. Now we call it transactional vendor. We used to call it strategic contributor. We now call it strategic collaborator. Here you are working with folks often seen on the same side of the table as opposed to opposite sides. You have more domain expertise, more value add, and so on. And then what used to be trusted advisor or trusted partner, we've now called trusted co-creator. And that really reflects the change that we see in the buy-sell relationship, in the changes that have occurred over the last several years, where folks don't want to be talked to so much as they want to be co-creating with. Yeah. And so those are the 5 levels of relationship. Very quickly on process. Ad hoc, everybody's basically doing their own thing. Informal, we have a documented sales process. Reps have been exposed to it. Managers are encouraged to reinforce it, but it is neither enforced nor reinforced. It's just sort of out there. Had a VP of sales recently tell me, yeah, we need to dust that off. Yeah, okay, good idea. Formal process, it's documented. It's the way we do business around here. And it is enforced. It is reinforced. It's part of the way we do business. Agile is starting to now be supported with CRM, analytics, technology, and so on. And finally, customized, I mentioned, reflects machine learning, AI, and so on. Those are the 5 levels of process implementation. And given those 5 definitions of relationship and 5 definitions of process, we have a question or two for you.
Yeah, let me go ahead and launch our poll. So we'd love to get some feedback from everybody on this. Okay, so we're going to ask you really the same questions. How do you rate your own level of customer relationship at your organization? And how do you rate your own levels of sales process at your organization? So we'll give you just a few seconds here to answer that poll, and then we'll throw that up on the screen. And then Barry, you'll be able to take us through where the survey respondents landed.
Absolutely.
Right, on this matrix. Great.
See how this compares with the data we already pulled in.
Okay, I'm watching. It's still have a few people responding.
Could play the final Jeopardy music here.
There you go. All right, looks like we got most of them in. Just for time's sake, I'm going to cut it here.
So let's see how it fell out this time.
All right, so let me share the results with everybody. Okay, Barry. So,
Wow. Okay. So 60% falling in the middle, solution consultant, uh, very few transactional vendors. But one of the things I didn't say, I'm glad to see it's only 3%. Transactional vendors, reps are basically walking, talking brochures. Okay. They're all about their product and service. But it's really when you get above that level that you're seen as beginning to understand how people use this stuff, track record of delivery, starting to understand their business and so on. Solution consultant, great, 58%. Strategic collaborator, 19%. Trusted co-creator, yeah, this is right in line. The highest basically we've ever seen, even going back to trusted partner / advisor, and now trusted co-creator. It's generally 9% or less. So yeah, it is elevated. Let's see about the process. What have we got going on there? Or can I see that? Maybe yeah, here we go.
Scroll down a bit. Yeah.
Got it. So again, very few in the ad hoc. Great to see. Informal process, 10%. Formal, again, wow, 60%. And agile and customized coming in just above a quarter, 17 and 10. This actually mirrors pretty closely what we're about to show you is how we've combined these over the years. So let's take a look at the data and how we aggregate it.
Okay, sounds good. Here we go.
So now that you've identified where you are on the matrix, you know which cell, both if you cross-index your level of relationship and informal. We saw most of the folks were at solution consultant and formal process, which would put you squarely in the center of this matrix. And then there were a few sort of heading off to the upper right. And I think there were about 15, 18% drifting down to the lower left. You can see that we've called the lower left level 1, and 30% of responding firms this year. And in case I didn't say this earlier, we had about 260 firms respond this year. 30% of those fell into what we call level 1, 42% level 2, and the remaining 28% were level 3. What's interesting about this, again, we're always interested in seeing how this compares year over year. Prior year, it was 30% level 1, 38% level 2, and 32% level 3. And we're seeing level 3 has now come down 4 points. So fewer people are attaining, that upper right-hand segment, I guess I would call it. We'll talk about all of that in a second. There are two other things worth pointing out. You'll see there are two white cells that aren't part of either of any of the performance levels. We call these no-fly zones. And the first one is ad hoc process, trusted co-creator. You'll see there's nobody there. Really, there was no significant data reported there. And what that tells us is for a small boutique firm, the principals may operate in an ad hoc way and still enjoy high-level relationships, high-trust relationships with clients. But we don't see that scale in any size organization. Organizations that operate in an ad hoc way, we do not see being perceived by their customers as trusted co-creators. And going down to the far opposite corner, it seems that firms that have gotten to a level of customized process, there's sort of this aerodynamic uplift with everything else they're doing. They are at a minimum perceived as preferred supplier. So we call those two white cells no-fly zones because we just don't see people operating in an ad hoc way getting high in their relationships, or people who've gotten to high level of process implementation not moving up in relationship. So that's the breakdown, but how do these folks perform? And we have specific KPIs or performance metrics that we look at every year. And what I can tell you, we'll go through some of the numbers here, but just on the overarching, kind of on the macro level, moving over and up in the matrix is goodness. Okay. So here we see the levels 1, 2, and 3, percentage of reps meeting, beating quota went from 35% for level 1, 52%, and 59% for level 3. And remember, the average across all of them was 49%. So you can see, level 1 is really dragging things down, but there's, still plenty of opportunity. Overall revenue attainment on average was 83%, 79 for level 1, 87 for level 2, and 92% for level 3. That's not to say that there were level 3 firms, even some level 2 firms, that weren't at or over 100%. But when we look at the average of each of these groups, that's what we're seeing here. The other areas we look at are the outcome of forecast deals, won, lost, and no decision. Win rate for level 1, 42%, 49% for level 2, and 52% for level 3. And what that says to me is there's still plenty of headroom here. Even level 3 firms, roughly half of what they're forecasting. And let me reinforce this. These are forecast deals, not pipeline. So this isn't overall pipeline close rates. This is close rates on forecast opportunities. And if you drop down to the line below, no decisions, 30% no decisions of forecast deals for level 1, 26 for level 2, and 22% for level 3. 3 in 10 deals that are being forecast at level 1 wind up nada, zilch. A quarter of those at level 2, and even better than 1 in 5 for level 3. This is enormously expensive, because if you think about the energy, resources, and time that go into pulling deals all the way to the end to where they're forecast and have them come up zero, it's incredible. And the missed opportunity of other deals you're not pursuing while you're going, that makes the number really hurt. And finally, we look at turnover rates, voluntary and involuntary. That's the one area or 2 areas where level 1 is leading. They have 32% turnover versus 7 for level 3, almost twice as high turnover. So all of this to say, moving over and up in the matrix is not just a nice idea. It's not just our philosophy. You want to be in the upper right-hand corner. The data has been completely consistent since we came up with this format 15 years ago. This is the data, and it's every year comes out the same way.
And that's what I was going to ask. I mean, this is significant, right? I mean, there are huge jumps from level 1, level 2 to level 3 across every category. All the KPIs are posted here. Is that consistent? Do you see that year over year?
We do. And the other thing I'll say is the reason we picked these metrics is because these are all metrics that companies actually track. Okay, when we talk about conversion rates from, qualified lead to first meeting and so on, there's some data now, certainly from CRM and MarTech applications that are starting to be more reliable. But these are things that people have been tracking and do track year over year: quota, plan attainment, forecast deals, and so on, turnover. And yes, ever since 2007, 17 years, the data has been completely consistent. Not to say it doesn't change and that the distribution changes, but moving over and moving up are both good things. Final thing I'll say about that, Justin, is it's easier to move over than it is to move up, because the level of process implementation is completely within your control. That's all inside your business. Of how rigorous, how consistent, and so on you want to be. And it has powerful payoff.
Yeah, no question. And I think, everybody understands, and I think we'll dig into this a little bit more, but how important sales process is. But I like the way that you said that, completely in your control. Yep. And the level of relationship, there's another party here. And that level of relationship, really, there's a lot of things that go into that, but those are the skills, right? That's where salespeople and sales leaders need to have the skills that they need to have in order to do the things they need to do during that interaction, during that sales process, to really be viewed and to obtain that level of relationship. But that's earned over time, and it's not easy, right? So I think great point there. All right, so then let's talk before we get in. I know we're going to get into three really key areas that I know sales leaders talk to us at Janek every day about. But before we do, I wanted just to maybe take the high level view and have you, Barry, just give us overall what were some of the real key findings that you saw from this year's report, maybe comparing to other years?
Sure. The the overarching conclusion is that moving over and up is goodness. But what are the actions? What are the activities that support that? And again, the pandemic was clearly a black swan event. People are saying, we've never seen anything like this before. It's like, oh, really? We've never seen, certainly in our lifetime, a pandemic like that, but we've had other black swan events. And we only had to look back to 2008, 2009 to the Great Recession to see, the prior black swan. And we did do that. And we looked at that time span. And we also looked, at the 2021, 2022 data. And the things that paid off the most, and what these stars are showing here, is if you were performance level 1 and just kept doing what you were doing, maybe even tried to do more of that, you basically got wiped out. But if you were able to move up to level 2 during that time, you basically held steady. So you didn't make up any ground, but you didn't lose any ground. Level 2 firms that just continued to march dropped down, but level 2 firms that increased their level of process implementation, their level of relationship, mostly by focusing on existing customers. If they moved up 3, their performance results held steady or slightly better. They didn't get washed out. And so we looked at the things, well, how did they do that? And there were 4 things that came up that we thought were, worth calling out. The first was that they weren't just process oriented, but they were rigorous in their process implementation. So I talk about both reinforcing it, but also enforcing it. They were consistent and ongoing in their coaching. Justin, you might want to pull these up, these bullets. They did sales methodology, process training, and they trained people on the use of the technology that they had. So they didn't just, sort of give lip service to process. They were all about it. They were consistent and ongoing in their coaching, and they trained their people and continued to reinforce the training, both on their sales methodology and the technology they had. Those were the winning combinations. Couple of things. I saw a couple of quick questions. One was, were the types of firms or industry factored into the scorecard? When we had in the past 1,000 responses, we could segment by vertical and so on. This year, with 250 to 60 responses, we can segment by size of firm. Typically, we do it by revenue, but we aggregate all of them for the performance levels. The other was a question about voluntary versus involuntary turnover. That's not churn of customers. That's a churn of your sellers. Voluntary being your sellers quit to go somewhere where they think they can be more successful. Involuntary is when your sales rep is let go, typically for lack of performance after being put on a PIP.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Barry. Thanks for calling out some of the chats. We'll try to keep our eye on that too as we go through. So here are the 3 areas that we really wanted to lean into today. I know if we talk to sales leaders every day, these are always in the top of the conversation. Prospecting, new leads, new business development, new logos is always one of the top 3. Moving on into quotas. So attaining quota, attaining plan, hitting goals. So we'll talk about what the data has to say about that. And then finally, coaching. Coaching and development, and what kind of impact that has on the results of high performing, mid performing, or low performing organizations. So we'll take a deep dive into each of these. Let's begin with prospecting, right? So top of the funnel, and I think if we're talking about decoding sales in a digital world, I don't think you can leave out the thing that everybody's talking about is AI. right? And how does AI, to what extent are sales organizations using AI and how are they using it? And specifically then looking at, okay, are the results improving, right? And to what extent are the results improving? And I know you've asked some questions around AI in this year's survey. So I'll pull up a couple slides, and Barry, if you could walk us through what you found on these questions for the audience, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah. Has anybody heard mention of AI recently?
A little bit.
We've actually been looking at AI for sales since 2015. And when Jim first started looking at it back then in 2015, there were about 36 AI for sales solutions. We put out a guide on AI for sales over 3 years, 18, 19, and 20. And in the 2020 version, we had 200 apps that we looked at and another 200 that we hadn't looked at, and now they're over 1,000. So, I mean, it's just unbelievable how many point solutions and how AI is really coming to the fore. In any event, we asked folks, have you implemented it? Have you evaluated it? Have you evaluated, decided against it, or are you just trying to ignore it? And this chart represents those people who have implemented it for at least a year. We're not saying this is the market. We're saying this is the functionality of those people in our survey who have implemented it for the 12 months or longer. And the number one functionality they were looking at is prospect engagement messaging. And then you'll see fairly sharp fall off in kind of a tie for second place for sales activity, call analysis, and content management, and then sales intelligence and lead scoring, and it falls off after that. But clearly, leveraging technology to engage prospects and to warm up cold leads and to personalize messaging or tailor messaging was the number one and has been the number one AI functionality that we've seen surveyed. And the question is that paying off? And the next couple of slides, I think, suggest that it is. We ask about the quality of marketing leads and the quantity of marketing leads. And of course, there are never enough leads. We can go back to Glenn Ross, the Pulitzer Prize winning play, I think came out in 1965 or 68 or something. Got to have the Glengarry leads, it's all about the leads. But we look at both quality and quantity. And the blue bars on the left chart here show the quality of marketing leads being adequate, exceeds expectations, or excellent, comes in at about 70, I think it's 77% or something. 58% are adequate, another 8%, so 66%, and then 10% of are excellent, brings us in about right at 3/4, versus those who are not using AI. Their tallest chart is needs improvement, and their adequate, exceeds, and so on comes in at about 40%, so much lower. And then when we look at the quantity of leads, needs improvement, you can see jumps way up, 58, 57% firms, and unacceptable is another 15. So better than 70% are saying, we need more and we need better. If you look at the blue, it's not that they don't need improvement, but they are at least seeing adequate, exceeds, or excellent, taking them, over 60%, which is good news. Is that actually paying off? This last chart, I think, on this topic really tells the tale. We look at, among other things, conversion rates through the sales cycle, and the percentage of qualified leads, SQLs, converting to initial discussions, whether you MQL to SQL, whatever, the qualified lead actually leading to a first discussion has been steadily falling over the last 10 years. So in 2015, it was 55%. 2021, it was like 32%. 2023, about 27%. So it's been steadily downhill for the last 10 years. This year's data was the first year we saw a turnaround, an actual uptick up to 38% of qualified leads converting to initial discussion. And the first question we had is, well, are we grading easier? Are people, hoping against hope and just accepting more deals? But this is really the buyer saying yes to an initial discussion. So we think it's a legitimate data point. The real question is going to be what happens next year. Once is an incident, twice is a coincidence, three times is a trend. Well, we had a 10-year trend saying it's going downhill, but this looks like it could be an inflection point. And if it really is turning around, that would be great news and definitely ROI on the AI investment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it speaks to everybody seeing all these emerging technologies as it relates to that top of funnel. So a lot of those things about messaging and customized messaging and getting in front of the buyer at the right time with the right message, doing a better job in that obviously would have a big impact, right, on this kind of metric. So maybe like you said, it's just 1 year, not necessarily a trend, but maybe this is speaking to all of these technologies and some of the top of the funnel changes that organizations have made is really putting people with the right message in front of the right buyer at the right time.
Yep. Let's hope so.
All right.
Hope is not a strategy.
That's right. Thanks for going through prospecting. So let's move on to the next topic, sales quota. And this is reps attaining quota or reps achieving a quota, excuse me, but also just plan attainment, right? So we can kind of talk about both of those things. They're two different things, first of all, but also equally important. So I think let's start with going back to one of the earlier slides, Barry, that we popped up, but let's just look at quota and plan attainment. And if you could speak to these a little bit and maybe some of the other points you made around what are some of the things that top performing organizations are doing and doing better to really move this, because there's significant movement, in these areas if you're comparing level 1 to level 3. I mean, it's just tremendous, right? From reps, for example. So can you tell us a little bit about, what you learned here?
Yeah, this is really, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but, when roughly a third of your reps are making plan, and less than 80% revenue attainment, that is not a successful formula. And, 59% getting there and 92% of plan, you're really in the game at that point. And, I'm just going to reinforce these things. We talked about rigorous process, sales methodology and training, technology training, and consistent ongoing coaching. Those are the things that are really bringing it home. And I think this next slide, in the interest of time, we'll just jump to that, really shows quota attainment by process type. And this is what you want to see with a revenue chart. This is what you want to see with a quota attainment chart is, down here going up there. And this is literally by sales process type. Ad hoc, the average sales quota attainment was 41%, informal 46%, formal, this is how we do business around here. We're actually reinforcing it, 49%. 53% for agile and 55% for customized. This is called going in the right direction. And, I don't know how else to say this because we've been saying it over and over again. But, when people look at sales process and they're thinking, do I gotta or really, and that's not my style. No. Man, the data just does not support that orientation or that attitude. It really is saying, dude, this stuff pays off, and if you look at any, NFL or the, baseball, we're getting into the last part of the baseball season. If you looked at the Olympics, all of those people are leveraging technology and data to do better. And again, this is the part that's completely within your control. And it's clearly the path to doing better. That's all I could go on and on, but I'll stop there.
Yeah. Thanks for making that point. Yeah. And again, the same for us too, and I know it's easy people have a natural reaction to push back, right, on process and regimen. But at the end of the day, it's the game plan, right? And it's the plays, and it's following those plays consistently at a high level every time is what gets those best outcomes. So I like your point about you just can't ignore the data. We see the same data on our end, but it's what a compelling chart. I mean, just huge jumps from each level that was reported. So these are organizations that reported themselves, right, at each of these levels by sales process, and then just comparing their reported quota attainment, right, Barry, is what we're looking
Yep.
at. Yeah.
Well, you can ignore the data, but as they say, you can definitely do it, but you can't do it indefinitely.
All right, great. Okay, well, thanks, Barry, for going through that. Let's go through one more topic.
Yep.
Near
Yep.
and dear to our heart here at Janek, which is training and coaching.
Yep.
So I'd love to get some feedback from you here, Barry, on how training and coaching has an impact on sales performance. What have you seen this year, and how does that compare to other years as well?
Yeah. As you move across, I've been hammering on increasing level of process implementation. But what we see as people move from left to right is increased process orientation, increased collaboration, sharing among team members because they have a basis for doing so, and increased coaching with technology. And so one of the questions we're going to ask everybody here in just a minute is, what's coaching look like in your place? Coaching, everybody loves going, yeah, we got that. Yeah, we do that. But our question is, how do you do it? And you'll see, let's just pop up the poll right now. It's either managers are left to do their own thing, ad hoc. It's either not a priority. We recognize the need, but we haven't implemented a process yet. We coach, but it's informal and occasional. We have a formal, consistent coaching process, or we have a formal, consistent coaching process supported by technology. Very quickly, be interested in seeing how this group breaks down, and then we'll show you how the overall survey population did.
Yeah, great. We'll give them a few minutes to respond. I see the responses coming through. But this is another one, Barry, that's in our control, right? I mean, this is
well, you'd think so.
This process that we define, and it's our discipline, right? To any sort of business process, it's a coaching process as well.
Well, you would think so. I said this earlier. Everybody coaching, yeah, we do that here. But we have two question areas. One is, who's coaching the coach? And generally the answer is no one. And then these are the questions we ask of, do they know what to coach? Do they know how to coach? Are they coaching, and is it working? So here we go. So 3% coaching is not a priority. 10% we recognize, but we haven't implemented it. We have an informal, occasional, 53%. You see this matches up pretty well. Formal, 20%, informal with technology, 13%. And let's go ahead and show how that compares with the overall survey population. Formal coaching, you had 3%. The overall survey was 5%. Formal coaching supported by CRM, 11.5%. I think it was 10% we just saw. Formal coaching process, 7%. But here's where you see it. 3/4 of the folks are informal, or it's left up to each manager. So pretty even split there. Basically 40% informal coaching. I think we're a little higher in this group, 53%. And coaching left up to each manager, 36%. So basically 75% are saying, yeah, figure it out. And I guess the question is, how's that paying off? The Dr. Phil question, how's that working for you? Let's take a look at this next chart. Here's what we see. When there's no coaching guidance, average revenue attainment is 46%. Some coaching guidance, 51%. And coaching with CRM and analytics, 55%. That's what the breakout is. We didn't have a significant number for the customized or what are we missing here? I think we're missing in any event. We only have 3 of the 5 because 2 of them, there weren't enough to support that. But no coaching and some coaching, informal quota attainment is at or below 50%. So Again,
another chart.
not just a nice idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's look at it by win rate.
Yeah. And here you can see coaching with CRM analytics, win rate on forecast deals, 51%, with some coaching, 46%, with no coaching, 42%. So it's easy to look at the green bars, but I think it's also important to really look at the orange and blue bars. The big winner here is not your competition. The big winner is no decision. That's the one that keeps creeping up. And again, it's enormously expensive to go the whole distance only to have no decision.
Yeah. And I don't think it's anything revolutionary or new that, we've been talking about, everybody's been talking about the effects of coaching, right? And how important it is, and how, top performing organizations tend to have a strong coaching culture, and focus on coaching. But there seems to be this resistance. Why do you think that is? Is it a lack of knowledge, or is it just a difficult thing to do?
Well, I think there are a few things. One is, I said this to rooms full of sales leaders. Can you imagine a scenario where, because you've seen all this great data and it's like, yeah, coaching, I get it. Let's get on the coaching bandwagon. I'm all about it. And you sit down with one of your reps and you get started, and the rep says, I think this is great, Justin. I like where you're going with this, but before we get too jazzed up about, let me just ask you a quick question. Did I make my number last year? Yeah. And the year before that? Yeah. And the year before? Yeah. Tell you what, when I don't make my number, let's talk. And I ask, can you imagine such a thing? And of course, everybody always busts up because everybody's heard that one. There's a fatal flaw in that statement. When I don't make my numbers, let's talk. And the flaw is it's too late.
Yeah.
By the time you know that you haven't made the number, it's done. You haven't made the number. And so this whole notion of, I got this, watch me. Can you imagine, any of the NFL players, quarterback, any of the positions saying, you can't watch me practice. I'll just show up for the game, just trust me. I got this. It's like, that's not how it works. That's not how you get better. That's not coaching. So, it doesn't hold any water. And so I think that's one of the problems. And the other is, I think managers largely are victims of victims. Nobody's coaching them. And if asked, what are you working on right now? What coaching plan do you have? Most of them don't have a good answer. And in our view, that just lacks integrity. You're basically saying, I'm a big kid. I don't have to eat my veggies. You eat them. And that's just not right.
Yeah. And do you also find that most people in leadership roles were once sellers that were great at sales and then put into a management role, which requires a whole new skill set?
Yeah. And we have a video on this on our YouTube channel. Do I really want to be a manager? I think a lot of people buy this will be good for your career speech and move into management. And it's not good for their career. It's bad for their career. It's bad for them because it's a completely different skill set that they not only don't have, they don't have any interest in developing.
Yeah, I think it's just important for people to recognize that, right? That it's a different skill set. Not that you can't be successful. You certainly can. And a lot of people are successful, but you've got to get focused on different things.
Yep.
All right. Well, in the interest of time, I know we could talk about this for quite some time, Barry, but let's look ahead a little bit. So I know one of the questions that you ask are, what are sales leaders focused on over the next year? What are their highest priorities? What are the things they're looking to solve? So let me pull up a slide so you can talk us through this.
What just occurred to me is we've been reporting these year over year, and here we have them again this year. It just occurred to me, based on the question that was asked earlier, we've never looked at the top 3 sales objectives by performance level. That would be really interesting to see. It never occurred to me till just now. So thanks for asking that question earlier. But definitely we'll look at it later. But here it is when we just look at the total population. Number 1 perennial front runner is increased new customer acquisition. Got to have new logos. Anybody that one? Increase salesperson effectiveness, further penetrating existing accounts, and then back to lead gen and lead conversion. those are the front runners, and they if anything, they just sort of jockey for position among the top four. Lead gen and new logo acquisition are, often vying for, from third to second to first, first to third, but they're always in the top ones. And then further down, you'll see things like, increasing selling time for salespeople and onboarding folks and channel effectiveness, so on. But, you can see, these are really trailing edge, that they're not getting a lot of attention. And we don't see managers coaching getting a lot of attention either.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you just from our perspective, these are certainly the things that we're working with our clients on. Right. So this is consistent for us. New logos, of course, salesperson effectiveness, existing accounts, maximizing existing relationships, and then lead generation, more new leads for more new accounts. So that's not inconsistent at all with what we do here at Janek and how we support our clients. All right, great, Barry. Thank you for the talk as always. Nice to have you on. Thank you so much for sharing your data. I'll now turn it back over to Michelle. I know we just have a few minutes left, but if there's time for any questions and wrap up, happy to answer those. Otherwise, maybe we can get those answered afterwards and circulate all the answers to any questions that we weren't able to answer now.
Sure.
You're on mute, Michelle.
Apologies. We do have a few questions. And as a reminder, if you do have a question that you haven't yet submitted, please go ahead and enter it in the chat and we'll get through as many questions as time allows. Barry, the first question is for you. What practical steps can overwhelmed sales managers take to manage these challenges while maintaining team motivation?
I was actually, Justin, go back to that prior slide, because I was going to say something about just looking at that. We have been saying for years that first-line sales managers are overlooked and overwhelmed. So I agree with the questioner entirely. Here's a question that when we're, providing advisory services and everybody gets it, we need to bolster and have more involvement, more coaching from our frontline sales managers. The first question I always want to ask is, what are you going to take off their plate? What are you going to take off their plate? And when looking at this chart, increased selling time for salespeople. What about increasing managing time for managers? There's so many things we see, huge percentage of time going to reporting, forecasting, attending meetings. What are you going to take off their plate? Here's something we want you to do that you're not currently doing. What are we going to take off or support you in some other way? And frankly, I think the number one candidate for that should be forecasting. We have said for years that we think forecast accuracy is an oxymoron. When you look at, the time, energy, and resource, manager time, energy, and resource that goes into creating forecasts, and basically, the data goes, you could get there by flipping a coin and have equally valid results. Give that time back to people, and let's get serious about coaching and process implementation. That would be my number one vote.
It looks like we have time for one more question. Justin, given the increase in no decision outcomes, how can sales organizations improve their win rates while addressing this growing challenge?
Yeah, great question. No decision is, well, we could go back to some of the data is growing, right, year over year. And I think, to me, there's probably two factors there. One is, why does it result in no decision, a do nothing decision, which is, sellers need the ability to truly position the full value of their offerings, right? So that comes from really understanding needs, being able to understand pain, quantify pain. So, customers really understand the damage, right, that it's causing. And then ultimately being able to present a solution in a compelling way and show the value of that solution greater than, consistent with the pain that they are experiencing. So a lot of that has to do with the sales motion. But I think the other thing that's happening there with no decision, and this is a trend that we've seen year over year in some of our research, is that there's more and more people involved in the decision-making process. And when you have more and more people involved, it's just harder for them to make a decision just by function, right? You've got to gain consensus across not just two people, but now it's 6 or 8 or 10, I think is some of the latest numbers that we're seeing. So there's a lot of people involved in groups involved in decisions. So I think the other thing is just consensus. We're working with our clients and sellers on how to navigate that, how to navigate all the stakeholders and influences, and how to help them come to a consensus, how to make it easier for them to make a decision. Because if you don't, then that's what you're left with. Right? You're left with these no decisions that will just maybe not right now. So,
well, the one thing I would add to that, Justin, not only are there more, but they are going to have different pains and different wants. So in the first part of your answer, when you're talking about, really connecting the pain to the value and what better looks like, if you have stakeholders that you haven't uncovered, haven't addressed, those pains are also going unaddressed, and they're very likely different than some of the folks that you are talking to, and you want to make sure you cover all the bases.
Completely. Yeah, and that's the hard thing to do, right? And that's definitely a sales motion. That's a sales skill, is to not only identify who's involved, but what are their pains, all of them uniquely, because they all come from a different point of view, different departments, but also what level of influence do they have on the decision, right? So now you have to kind of gauge that, because that's a factor too. And it's not as easy perhaps as it once was, which was, the question we used to ask before in sales, which was, who's the decision maker? Like, it was a single person. Well, now, there's buying groups, and that's really less and less common, right? That there's a true decision maker. It's a group now. So those are the two for me.
Well, we do have a slide that has a few QR codes in case anybody would like to download the Sales Mastery report. We'll also be sending a link to that with the recording of this webinar. We also encourage you to scan to take our free sales audit as well. But most importantly, we just want to thank everybody who joined us for today's webinar. Justin and Barry, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your expertise. And if anybody has any additional questions or would like to connect directly with the Janek team, you can either reach out through our website, or you can contact us directly through social media. Thank you all for your time, and have a wonderful rest of your day.